Hospital port as pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Herpanwo TV. And this is another reply video to Stefan Molyneux, and it's called Humiliation. Now, this is a bit of a painful topic for me, and in fact, you may have guessed by the title. Humiliation is never an painful thing, is it? Yeah, this is actually... It's painful because I'm going to have to go into some deep personal stuff for this particular video, but it is necessary. It's necessary, and I think firstly, I think you could gain something from this, the information I'm going to give to you, and also it's cathartic for me. It's healing from my own sort of predicament, if you know what I mean, as I've explained previously. In fact, this video is kind of a part two. It's kind of a part two to a previous Stefan Molyneux reply video I did. Not the last one, which is the second one on UFOs. It's actually one I did a while ago called Confession, My Confession, a reply to Stefan Molyneux. I will put a link in the description box to that, as usual, so you can go and check that out. So this is kind of a part two to that. I wanted to get... You see, I've been putting it off, but I realised I need to get it out the way, and basically I want to put it behind me. And well, I've got a lot coming up this weekend. I'm actually leaving on Thursday evening because I'm going to go to Hull to the Research and Witness Convention 2020. So if you, by the way, if you want to come to that, if you're watching this before the end of the month, end of February, do go. It's actually in Hull. It's just Google RAWCon 2020, RAWCON 2020, and you'll find it all about it. It's a very cheap conference in Hull, the whole weekend. I'm going to be there on Sunday. Well, I'm going to be there all weekend, but I'm speaking on Sunday afternoon. But I have my book stall as well, so do get along to that if you can. It'd be great to see you. So I'm looking forward to that. I also got to do something else on Thursday evening, and I can't tell you what that is yet, but all will be revealed, because yes, there will be Herpanwo TV videos for these activities, fear not. Now, so what this is basically, I think, is kind of a part two to my confessions video. I mean, I've put a link in the description box to it, but I'll just go through the basics of the confession video first before we come on to the main topic of this particular part two, this particular video, humiliation. Now, what it is, I did my video confessions in reply to a call-in show that Stefan Molyneux did, which is called Megtow Saved My Eggs. That's a good name, isn't it? It's a good title. Megtow Saved My Eggs. It's program 3879. So it's a not so... I'm going to come to another one, an older one of Molyneux's as well. But yeah, so he did the show Megtow Saved My Eggs, and one of the callers, because he used to do multiple callers in those days, was a chap called Logan. Not Kevin Logan. No, his first name was Logan. And Logan was in a bit of a predicament because he was married to a woman who he was in love with, and this woman ran off with his best friend, his best male friend. Oh dear. Yeah, so essentially he lost his wife and his best friend as a result. It's a double betrayal. And Stefan lambasts this guy by saying basically he's too nice. He's a pushover. Now, it makes uncomfortable listening for me, because that's what people used to say about me. I mean, people haven't really said it seriously in recent years, but there was a time when people said that sort of thing about me. It was unpleasant, and it was confusing for me, because often when I look back at things that have happened to me in the past, I see them differently to how they actually were at the time. So when I look back at them, I sometimes see things more clearly and know more about them than I did when they happened. For example, I might have acted in some certain way back then, I don't know why, or someone else did something, I don't know why. I come forward a few years, with retrospect, I suddenly understand it all. Indeed, I've talked about this before on other videos. But basically, I'm talking here about... really, my confessions video goes into detail on this, but basically it's about primarily my first decade at the hospital, maybe slightly longer. There's no definitive beginning or end to this slice of time that we're discussing here. There's no particular day that I started or any particular day that I finished. It was totally subconscious. I mean, today I think what surprises me, and other people will say this about me, is how much I've changed during the course of my life. I've changed far more in the course of my life, I think, than most people I know. I mean, most people I know who I've sort of known long ago and I know now, they haven't changed as much as I have in the same particular period of time. So this whole video, well, not so much this video, but my previous one, Confessions, and this introduction to what I'm going to talk about today, is primarily aimed at people who knew me back then, rather than my current friends and acquaintances. So, in fact, I would say, unless you knew me before about 2002, then this introduction and the Confessions video doesn't apply to you. I mean, you feel free to watch it by all means, but I'm not addressing you unless you knew me before that year. And I'm still in touch with a few people I knew that long ago, and I think I owe them an explanation. Some of them I owe a punch in the gob, basically. I won't tell you who they are for legal reasons, but some of them I do. And others, I think I owe an apology, because I realised I was putting on an act. Now, I wonder, is that normal? Do people do that? Because I'm told that we do, right? Yeah, we have a part of our personality. We have our personality, and we have the persona. The persona is essentially what we project to other people, subconsciously or consciously. We project this to other people, so it's what we allow other people to see of ourselves. I had a persona in those days that was very different to my true nature. And I didn't make the decision deliberately to project this particular persona, but I still did it. It was a decision that I made. And that's worrying. That's excuse me. That's quite worrying. And it's something that I cringe a bit as I remember. It really rankles. Now, Stefan Molyneux was always going on about personal responsibility, and excuse me, and how he tries to instill it into his guest Logan during this call. And I do understand kind of where he's coming from, but I also think Molyneux was a bit of a showman, and it's his custom to play for the audience, and sometimes he indulges in a bit of sensationalism and hyperbole, because it could be construed from what he says that Logan is 100% accountable for his experience, and that's kind of within line of popular wisdom, I would say, because when people are like that, when something happens like that to somebody, and indeed things like that have happened to me. Obviously, I mean, I've told you about Suastain, didn't I? I'm not going to put a link into my MGTOW video, but unless I change my mind, I probably will in the end. But anyway, my MGTOW video, I talk about what happened with me and Suastain, and it's not as bad, because the man that Suastain ran off with was not someone who was known to me. It was a stranger. And so that is not as bad, I think, as if it's someone you know, if it's a personal friend. Because for the reasons I've just said, it's a double betrayal. It's a betrayal of your lover and your friend. Whereas in this case, it's just a betrayal of my lover. And as I explained in my MGTOW video, she paid a very heavy price for what she did. So much so that it kind of makes revenge superfluous on my part. But when something like this happens, you often get, like, I mean, it hasn't happened to me this time, but I think if it had happened to me 20 years ago, and indeed what often happens today with some people, you get the call goes out from the multitudes. You shouldn't let them get away with treating you like that. And that's what the multitudes tend to approach the person who's been abused in whatever way, and they tend to say that. They tend to say you shouldn't let them get away with that. That's far more common than the multitudes approaching the person who did it and saying you shouldn't be treating that person like that, or going to the person who's the victim and saying they shouldn't be treating you like that. And this can go to ridiculous extremes. It can go to the extent of saying something like, well, you deserve this for being such a sucker or a pushover, whatever the word you use. You know what I'm talking about here. Milquetoast. This is something I'm exploring with my new book, actually. And it's not comfortable to research and contemplate this sort of thing. But you know, Bernie Madoff. Now, Bernie Madoff was the world's most devastating fraudster. He actually embezzled about $8 billion off various investors. He eventually was caught and he went to jail. But one of the commentators said at the time, he said, Madoff had millions of accomplices, the investors who trusted him. And that is, I think that's pretty awful. It really is. It's sad. It makes me uncomfortable to hear that. And I think I've always felt that, and I think that it was that kind of attitude that actually may have motivated me to do what I did. And I don't know. I didn't do it. I didn't wake up one morning and say, "This is what I'm going to do." It was a subconscious thing. But I think sometimes that I don't fit in because I don't accept that mindset. I don't. I'm 90 degree to that whole attitude, and I don't think I know I'm not the only one. But really, the only reason I know I'm not the only one is because of what I did. I mean, I think it was a charade that I carried out because you see. I mean, if you seen my maybe I'll put a link. Hang on. I got notes. Where are my notes? Blah, 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 blah. Background. Hang on. Sorry, I should do this beforehand, shouldn't I? Hang on, notes. Okay. Oh, it's my Nice Guys video. All right, I'll put a link to my bloody Nice Guys video. I'm not putting a link to my bloody MGTOW video. All right. Oh, I'm not going to do that. Oh, or will I? No, I'm not going to put a link to the MGTOW video. I can't fill the damn comments description box with links. Anyway, all right, I'll put the Nice Guys video in because that was kind of like I was talking about that. Well, with the Nice Guys video, as you know, I was counselling this younger guy called Eric. That's the name I gave him anyway. Who was talking about the need to change one's personality from within. And see, I tried that too when I was a much younger person. I say young. I mean, I'm still young, but younger. You know what I mean? Yes, I'm 18 till I die. Yeah, but I was a younger person than I am now. But of course, it doesn't work. You can't change your personality. All you can do is change your persona. And if your persona deviates too far from your personality, it grates. You get a lot of dissonance, cognitive dissonance. I don't think everyone wears their heart on their sleeve completely. I don't believe every single person. There's a single person in the world whose personality and persona are not exactly the same, or are exactly the same. Sorry, I think everyone has some difference between their personality and persona. But if that changes too much, you're essentially playing a role. You're an actor playing a role when the real you inside you is suppressed. And indeed, this comes up in my new book as well, The Obscurati Chronicles. It's not available at all good bookshops now, unlike the Roswell trilogy. It's will be soon, and by soon I mean a couple of years. When I've read it, when I've written it. Oh my God, when I've written it. And you see, I find and have always found my entire life the idea of exploiting and abusing another person because they are vulnerable, unthinkable, and utterly obscene. If I ever committed such an offence, I would feel mortally ashamed of myself. And if anyone told the victim, well, you made it so easy for him, you need to change your ways and stop being such a sucker, and essentially exonerating me from any blame for my brutal actions by shifting it completely onto the poor, damaged individual, the destitute person I just defecated on. I would. That's anathema to me. And this is the implications, right? And I know, unfortunately, a lot of people go along with this. A lot of people believe this. It's a-okay, man, to mistreat other people so long as they're not capable of resisting. And well, this is the rapist's excuse, isn't it? She was asking for it. And we always think that's horrible, isn't it, when the rapist says that? But most people actually, believe in this thing, this veto of the psychopath. It's an ethical equation that most people accept, and I know it because I put it to the test, because I carried out a 10 to 15 year live experiment with myself as the guinea pig. I mean, what I endured in that time, what I put myself through, the contempt, the despicable maltreatment. People borrowed money from me and they didn't repay it. People talked down to me in front of other people in social gatherings for the sake of their own self-aggrandizement, for profit, or simply for entertainment. I had money and property stolen from me. I had nasty jokes made about me, rumours spread about me, lies told about me to others, and lies told to me continuously as a matter of normal interaction. I had pub drinks spiked, I had sabotage of my work, I had attempts to ruin my professional life and my social life, my career, my romantic life by others. And it worked too, most of the time. But why did I do it? Why did I do it? Why didn't I do it? Because this all was from my persona. I didn't know at the time. I mean, because I said it was completely and utterly subconscious. But I have, with self-reflection, I've realised why I did it, and that has been a liberation for me. And I mean, the disadvantages of it are obvious. I've just told you what the disadvantages are. But on the positive side, and this is where I'd say this to Molyneux. When you do this, you find out who your real friends are. I mean, that's a bit of a cliche, isn't it, man? You know when your real friend, you knew who your real friends are when, and you ... You find out who your real friends are when A, B, and C. Well, I'll tell you what. You know who your real friends are when you are totally and utterly defenseless, and anyone who wants to take advantage of you can. But some people don't, even though they can. Those are your real friends. Those are the people I want around me. That's the kind of person I am, because I've been in the reverse situation too. As I'll explain as when we come on to the other Stefan Molyneux audio, which I'm going to play for you shortly. I'll explain. And that it's been a bloody liberation. It's been a weight off my shoulder. When I came to this realization, it was a massive weight out of my shoulder. Off my shoulder. It was simply a test, and I didn't even know what it was. Subconsciously, I carried out a test on everybody who came close enough to me to be tested. So that's about 150 to 200 people during the time period we're talking about. Who would not take advantage of me even when they could? Well, what were the results of my experiment? How many people passed that test? The answer is 3. I won't name 2 of them, but I will name one of them because I have discussed this with him, and this is a man called Barry. Barry was a staff member at the hospital. He wasn't a porter; he was a civilian. He worked in the. Well, I don't want to identify him, but he did an admin and clerical job. He was an older man who I befriended when I started in portering, and as sometimes happens in workplace situations in professional life, he became a kind of a father figure to me, a kind of father figure within the environment, because the hospital environment is very different to normal life. It's a completely unique situation, which there's no real equivalent to the hospital experience anywhere else outside the hospital. And so if you're on the staff of the hospital, you are really doing something that you're having an experience which very few other people ever experience. And that builds bonds between you and the others within it. And so you almost build up a surrogate family as a result. It's just the normal chemistry of camaraderie between people, especially men, when we get together. And portering is essentially a male profession, not exclusively, but very, very overwhelmingly male. And Barry was not a porter, like I said, but he became a kind of father figure for me. I'm still in touch with him, although we're not as close as we used to be. But I'm still in touch with him. He passed that test, and he was one. There was only 2 others. But am I alone? I can't be. I can't be the only person in the world who doesn't want to take advantage of other people just because they're easy meat. I can't be. I mean, in fact, to use this is where Molyneux. I don't understand. I resent. But I do understand what Molyneux says in that program. MGTOW Saved My Eggs, program 3879. I do understand what the point he's making, but I don't. I resent it. Because whenever I come across somebody, and I sense they're a pushover, as Molyneux says. They sense that they're a pushover, and they're easy to take advantage of. What happens when I come across somebody like that? My first instinct is to protect them, and to defend them, and to keep potential abusers away from them. That's what I do. And that's my instinct. I don't know whether they appreciate that. I don't really care. But that's what I would do. I'd even befriend people like that for that purpose. I think I'm quite a nurturing person, really. I'm quite protective, and that's why I didn't want to see anyone else getting hurt, and I don't believe that simply them being vulnerable makes it okay. And that's, I suppose, is my empathic disorder, which I talked about on other videos. I know. I mean, the question I have to say, and this is why the first video is called Confession. Was it the right thing to do? Was it the right thing to do? Was it the right thing to do that? Was it right or wrong for me to do what I did? And the answer is no. It was wrong. So, the answer is wrong. Yeah. And I do feel bad about that. I mean, essentially, I was a spy in their midst. I lived a double life, like one of my characters, as I've talked about before in my spy video. But it wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't something I did deliberately. It was something I did completely and utterly unconsciously. But I realised that it was deliberate in the sense it was a subconscious will. So it was a decision I made on a subconscious level, but it wasn't something I decided consciously. It's weird how your mind works, isn't it? So I have apologised to Barry. I actually sent him copies of the article I wrote about this on the HPWA blog. And also the video I made, Confessions, my confession, I replied to Stefan Molyneux, and I just said, I'm very sorry, and he said, okay. I don't think he really understood me, actually. As for those who failed the test, well, I don't really see them very much. I bump into them occasionally, but honestly, I would never allow them near me again. This is what I mean. When you do this, it sorts out the sheep from the goats, right? You know who's good and who others. I mean, can you honestly say this? I'd say this. Can you honestly call someone a real friend? And surely Molyneux must realise this. If the only reason they're being virtuous towards you is because they fear the consequences of not being, because they know you will not let them get away with anything less, that doesn't really make them a real friend, does it? It means, in a sense, they're putting on a persona of virtue towards you, and deep down they may be slagging you off. Now, I must point out, I know other people who put on fake personas. Now, there was one guy who I won't name him actually, but he was actually my senior porter for several years, and I got on well with him, and we were good friends off duty. Of course, he outranked me, but he was a full senior porter, not a working senior, and I was a basic grade. But we got on well together, especially when we were in separate departments, and and he was like kind of Jack the Lad character. He was a kind of like the ultimate wide boy. You know what I mean? He was famous. He used to sit in his car shaving himself with his electric shaver in the rearview mirror. He used to walk into the social club and there's a mirror at the door, and he'd sort of like do his hair in the mirror, And it was all an act. He was putting on this. He wasn't really this Jack the Lad person. He was just pretending to be, because that's how he wanted people to see him. And I knew that. Because I got to know him quite well. I knew that, and I knew that because I stayed at his house a few times. I interacted with his friends, with his girlfriend, and people like that, and I saw the real him. I know I'm not the only one putting on an act. There are others too. So, that brings us on to Molly. What's he got to say for himself? So anyway, we're now going to move on to another Stefan Molyneux video. It's Free Domain Radio program 421. So it's an early one. It's from his first year. When he began, he did things like driving blogs, And so I'm just going to play you. This program at certain points, and we're going to discuss certain parts of it. We'll just start it now.
Hello, it's Steph. We start.
Yeah, it's his driving vlog. He basically did like 45-minute videos when he was driving to work and home again. So I'll move forward. I'll put this on full screen so I can see it. I'll move forward to 250. There we go. Actually, I won't put it on full screen because then you don't get as much brightness where I am. Hang on a minute. 250. Oh, back a bit. This will do.
Let's take 2.5, let's say, of the topic or question.
Right, this is called humiliation, and he begins by discussing the way people deal with humiliation, especially children.
Of humiliation, so I guess it could be relatively indefensible if I'm not relatively succinct, so here we go. Alright, there are three approaches that children in general tend to take when faced with the problem of intense parental humiliation. And intense doesn't mean that there's just a lot of it, because to humiliate someone is to indicate a particular personality structure on the part of the person who's doing the humiliation.
Okay, I'm just going to go forward a little bit. Well, he goes into more details about the three ways. Here we go.
We'll just talk about parents to keep it simple, but you can spread it as wide as you like.
It's not just kids, it's like adults as well.
When you have experienced humiliation as a child, there's generally one of three coping mechanisms or solutions that you can take, or approaches that you can take. Now, the first one is the handy-dandy world of dissociation, dissociation is the more technical term. Yeah. And dissociation is when you feel that the presence of humiliation or contempt or rage, but we'll just talk about humiliation, which has a few particular flavors of its own. When you feel the humiliation, you space out, you distance yourself, you have an out-of-body experience, you give up your will, you give up your preferences, you give up your choices, you simply become like a clear water going into a convoluted glass. You just wrap yourself around whoever has the most power in the moment. You simply conform and comply in a kind of wide-eyed, fixed smile, empty-headed kind of way. You become a sort of living ghost of conformity, and this relieves a certain kind of pressure in terms of humiliation, because the purpose of humiliation is not to...
Okay, now this is a long story. I can't really go into it now. It's very painful, actually, but this is how I coped when I was a child and a teenager. This is how I coped with it. I dissociated myself from humiliation. And what's more, this is how my father coped with humiliation and still does. And I'm saying that because I know he never watches my channel, so it's not a problem. But I've talked before about, like in my Lapis video, about my dad and his relationship to my mum and to his family and to people who call themselves our friends, and who were absolutely nothing of the sort. They were the most awful people of all. I'm just carrying a little bit further. Now this is what you're about to hear is actually very upsetting. but I'll talk about it in a minute.
Force obedience, right? This is sort of what is often misunderstood, particularly by children for obvious reasons. The purpose of humiliation is not to teach obedience, because then, of course, the humiliation would let up when the obedience was fulfilled. The purpose of humiliation is to destroy the soul, to destroy the self, not... obedience is just the cover story. Obedience is just the argument for morality that is used to cover up what a certain therapist, certain psychiatrist has called soul murder. Scheingold, I think his name was. Soul murder. It is the constant and overweening desire to destroy any presence of a self in someone else. So it's not obedience that is demanded, but self-annihilation.
It's shocking, and this is what I can't comprehend. That people, or if you can call them people, psychopaths, pseudo-psychopaths, sadists, reptilians, archons, and I take those ideas seriously, as you know, that they literally just want to destroy other people. That's the whole point of it. And you see this in, I mean, I won't cover it in this video, but the second half of this particular program 421 of Free Domain Radio, Stefan talks about the relationship between the people and the state, because he talks about political violence, which is exactly the same on a larger scale, on a collective level. What the state does to citizens is exactly the same. It's the brutality of the state, the violence of government, is far in excess of what is needed for the purpose of simply maintaining the world's ruling class. It takes on an almost pornographic, sadistic level, and Stefan talks about that in more detail, and maybe I'll do a future video about that, because I've got my own ideas about that. But this particular video is about personal humiliation. But we'll go forward slightly to, there we go. And this is there's a second way of dealing with humiliation
by children is to become an abuser, right? To become an aggressor against someone else. Usually, of course, a younger sibling. This tends to spiral up the birth order in pretty specific...
Okay, I'm just going to go forward slightly because he goes back into more detail. He goes into more detail in a minute. But yeah, he's talking about how children in particular are abused. Adults, they take it out on others. By becoming an aggressor, they maintain their self-esteem. They maintain their own self by passing down this humiliation to others. And I think this is what motivates a lot of school bullies. School bullies, you'll find, tend to be bullied themselves. Either they themselves are bullied by other kids in the school, or their parents are bullies. And Stefan goes into more details here.
Cage we call a family, and so
I think Stefan is overly cynical about families. Actually, I must say, but
when you experience humiliation as an elder brother, we'll just take this as an example again, not to offend all elder brothers, then you have an option that's not really available to the youngest in the family. Let's just say two brothers. If you're an elder brother, you have an option that's not really available to a younger brother, and that option, of course, is to turn and pass down the humiliation to the younger brother. So when you experience an assault which weakens and debilitates you, an assault of humiliation that weakens and debilitates you, then you have an option over and above just zoning out, over and above dissociation. And that option is to turn around and attack, to reproduce the humiliation, to regain your sense of strength and superiority and efficacy and power by turning around and attacking the younger sibling, to humiliate the younger sibling.
And of course, I think adults do that as well. This is why, if you're in a workplace environment, for example, you tend to get the person who tends to give you the worst amount of grief is the person with the least amount of power above your own level of power. So, in my case, I didn't get any aggravation from the trust board. It would be like some senior. It'd be like one of the senior porters was particularly unpleasant to me. I remember, stuck-up little bitch nurse. I mean, this is a character who fits numerous names and faces, but they're everywhere. These are the people who give you the most amount of grief. They're the foreman. The foreman, the junior NCO in the army. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. It's partly because, of course, you may have the closest working relationship, but also it's because for reasons Stefan talks about. I think it's the big bigs don't come and hunt down the little guys. They tend to attack the underlings within management, who then pass that on to others, and it's like a cascading fountain of sort of degradation and condescension. It's very, very sad. I don't know if there's a solution. I'll come on to that in a minute. But anyway, I'll go forward slightly. Here we go. To 950. Where is it? Because that's where he talks about the third method of dealing with it.
Dependent upon your parents and your parents' approval, then you can kick the shit out of the younger sibling, emotionally or physically, to restore your sense of power and efficacy. But if you are a younger sibling, you are going to end up in a situation wherein you are either going to dissociate or you are going to become masochistic.
That's sad. So dissociation, this is what I did. Masochistic, I was a bit like that too. Masochistic is when you start attacking yourself. You become your own bully. You start harming yourself. And I went through a phase, pre-teens, when I was a self-hater.
See, of course, children can't do what they should do. I mean, should in a totally ideal universe. In an ideal universe, you look at the person who's yelling at you as a child, and you say, well, this person is just spraying a fine effluviant of their own psychological shit on me, and it's not...
Yeah, I'll go forward slightly. But yeah, he does away with words, doesn't he? But what he explains is that over the next minute, he explains in various ways about how children can't interpret these things in that way. They don't. All the kid knows is they respond from a purely instinctive level. They're being harmed. Someone's doing harm to them. Why is it happening? And they take it personally.
So you are not going to expect that children are ever going to be able to do that. Children take everything personally, right? The parents are fighting, children feel bad. The parents are cold, the children feel angry towards themselves. And of course, what happens for elder siblings is that when parents are angry, the elder siblings blame the younger siblings. I mean, this is the inevitable cascading waterfall of shit that pours down the family hierarchy. So, the third route that those who are humiliated can take is the route of masochism, right? So there's indifference, or not so much indifference in an active sense, but dissociation. There is sadism, or cruelty towards those who are dependent on you as an elder sibling, towards the younger sibling as the elder sibling is dependent on the parents, and, last but not least, there's the wonderful world of masochism. And masochism occurs when the shit that people are dumping on you because they're too stupid or immature to deal with their own issues, you believe that those people should be idealized and are virtuous. In which case their anger and aggression towards you results from you being a bad person, right? So you are now a bad person. Dissociation is just like checking out of the hotel, right? But if you believe that you are that your parents or your elder sibling are right and good and moral and only looking out for your best interests, my dad was tough, but
see, it's like, that's painful. It's painful to listen to, isn't it? But kids, somebody might believe, not just a child, but maybe a particularly vulnerable adult might believe that they deserve the abuse they get. They might interpret this as their own deficiency. And that was me once, long time ago. I think, like I say, pre-teen, I went through that sort of phase. But I did believe, I think, have a real sense of being... I mean, like I say, I'll come on to Centaur later, because this is the age I was when Centaur abused me. I didn't think, oh, Centaur, you bastard. how could you do this to me? I thought, well, Centaur is this person who is so wonderful. My parents worship him almost as a god. I mean, he's this guy who's like, he's so superior. He was a superior sort of person socially to them, and they cherished him enormously. His friendship, they cherished it enormously. But it wasn't a friendship; it was a cult. And when your parents are worshipping a man as a god on earth, as a messiah, and then that messiah starts abusing you. I learned about Jesus when I was a kid, and I thought, imagine if Jesus, rather than healing people, suddenly started beating them up and harming them and mutilating them and killing them and doing the reverse of healing. What effect would that have on you? What effect would that have on someone who is deeply religious? And when you're a little child, you are essentially religious towards your parents and your family life. When you're the age I was, 8 to 10 years old, which is when I was abused by Centaur, and you see your parent. Not only do your parents not do anything to stop this abuse, they actually, my mother actually said to me, look, he didn't mean it. He was very sorry, but you were really bad. You were really behaving badly, So my mother was sort of like halfway between the two. Yes, she sort of proxy apologised for Centaur, but then she said, "Oh yes, but you were really behaving badly." It was a but in it. To say that to an 8-year-old kid is quite something. My dad, I told you this was deep personal stuff, didn't I? My dad, it was simply fall to his knees and kiss his feet. My dad, if it was his will to abuse his son, my dad's son, if it was Centaur's will to abuse my father's son and me, then who can question God's will? I look back at it now, and because it's easy to understand when you look back at it. When you're 8 to 10 years old and you're in the middle of it, it's very, very different indeed. I'll tell you, it's very, very, very different. Let's go forward slightly to 1345. There we go.
I'm not even going to guess the instances, but the likelihood is that they will then end up being run around by their own children and unable to set limits on their children, thus producing, brats who are aggressive.
Oh, not that bit, sorry, wrong part. I can't go into every point Stefan makes. Here we go. Right.
Yard and play soccer, but just not quite really there. Just not there. Not active, not curious, not assertive, not just...
Hang on, just checking my notes. Here we go. Go back a bit. This is where he starts talking about there being, the exploitation of adults by other adults, and this is where I think he contradicts what he says in program 3879.
Just not really there. And these people grow up to be exploited as adults, right? Because the one thing that is true, I think, fundamentally and very, in a very sad way, the one thing that is true, I think, is that children are the markers that you receive when you're a child. Give very strong, forward-looking kind of invitations to people in the future.
What he's saying here is that your own attitude can draw certain experience, treatment from other people when you're an adult. Now, this is what I mean by contradiction. Is he not going to say, "Yeah, you're a pushover, you're a mug"? And this is what he said to Logan in program 3879. So, and here he seems to be contradicting himself. And Molyneux does this a lot, actually, I must say.
And that is a very, very sad thing. I was listening to...
I think sad's an understatement. It really is. But, again, I wondered why... I wonder what he meant. Anyway, I'm going to move forward slightly because he goes into more detail. At 1640. Here we go.
That his sister had told him this story. His sister's in an airplane, and his sister says that, the stewardess, she looked at me, and I was standing up trying to fix something around my seatbelt, and she said, "Hey, miss, sit down now."
So the stewardess was rude to this lady. The stewardess on an airplane was rude to this lady. when she may not have been quite so abrupt with someone else. So why was she rude to this lady, and not she wouldn't have been to somebody else?
Yeah, in a sort of very aggressive kind of way. And Dr. Phil said, and he said, I couldn't understand it. I asked her, I said, well, what kind of vibes are you putting out that people think that they can treat you that way?
You see, that's the question. In a sense, he's talking about a Dr. Phil program. Dr. Phil is this American kind of like self-help guru. He used to do a TV show every so often. So this lady was abused. This stewardess treated her with less courtesy than she would another passenger. She treated this lady, this sister of Dr. Phil, with less courtesy than she normally would a passenger, because she got the sense that this person is non-aggressive, is not aggressive. Betty Shine talks about how people are brutalized, and maybe I'll come on to that in a minute. But yeah, Betty Shine was David Icke's medium. Do you remember from David Icke's early work, the woman he went to see her? But I mean, there's this hint of victim blaming that she says, well, what were you doing that caused this? Do you see what I mean? I mean, I think I would say my response would be, that was a horrible thing for that stewardess to do. I wish I'd been there, because I'd have put her in her place for you. I wish I'd been sitting in the seat next to you, because I would have told her, don't treat that lady like that just because you can get away with it. That's what I would have done, because all I want to do is protect people like that. I don't want them to change. I don't see why they should change. I want the people who do the abusing to change. I want them to be stopped from doing that abuse by force, if necessary, and for them to leave these people alone. That's what I want. That's my solution. It's weird, isn't it? It's a weird. I'm weird. Yeah.
Right. So when you're a child, you're helpless, but when you're an adult, there's a very complex set of signals and interactions that give people the sense of whether or not they can humiliate you.
The good side, though, as I've already explained, though, is that's how you find out. You find out you soon learn if people are able to humiliate you. You see immediately those who do not, because not everybody does. I've been in the reverse situation where I've been in a position where I could humiliate others. I've been able to, and I didn't. And there's been people who's in that position with me. Do you see what I mean? It's going back to this idea that it's kind of a filter. It's a use. If you are like that, you do learn that lesson in a way that someone who is more assertive never would. Somebody who's more assertive might go through their whole life with a bosom buddy and never find out that deep down this bosom buddy, within their inner personality and not their persona, actually it is not as warm and doesn't feel as much love for this person that they appear to. And the only reason the guy who's more assertive wouldn't know this is because this bosom buddy just won't treat his friend the way he wants to really deep down, simply because he knows he wouldn't get away with it, because he knows that this assertive guy wouldn't let him get away with it. And you've got to ask yourself, is that what you want? Do you want that kind of relationship?
Because it's certainly true that when people become humiliated, then they have a very unstable relationship with humiliation. They either succumb to it and fall off the planet and castigate themselves later, or they end up being overly aggressive and trying to humiliate others, right?
And that's the two versions: dissociation, masochism, becoming an aggressor. Yeah.
Whatever you don't accept, you end up reproducing in pretty horrible kinds of ways. So if you don't accept the pain of having been humiliated, then you have to idealize those who humiliated you, right?
And as I've explained, we come back again. I mean, I'm going to repeat certain points within this video, because Stefan does. This is how my dad still deals with humiliation. He idolizes the humiliators.
if somebody punches you in the face and you then think, oh boy, that person who punched me in the face is just about the best person ever, and I couldn't even imagine that there would be a better person than the person who punched me in the face, then it seems quite obvious that you're going to end up in a situation where you are going to end up punching someone in the face.
This is, well, my dad didn't become an aggressor, my dad dissociated. You see, some people might think, yeah, well, I hear complaints from people who say their own father was very aggressive. And so you could say that was a father who was passing down. He was using method 2, becoming an aggressor, passing down that humiliation. And they may say to me, well, Ben, you were lucky. You were lucky because your father wasn't aggressive. Indeed, my father has the opposite problem. My dad, I mean, his big problem, I think, is a complete absence of aggression. And some people say, well, you're lucky in that respect because your father dissociated too. Therefore, he didn't pass his humiliation down onto you. And the answer is that's correct. But the thing is, he allowed other people to do it. That's the problem. He allowed Centaur to do it. And, you know, if someone punched you in the face, they're the best people in the world. That's his attitude towards Centaur. And when I was 8 to 10 years old, how else could I interpret it? And the difference is I've changed now, but my dad's still the same. He's now 72 years old. And he is exactly the same. This is what I mean. I've changed so much. I've changed so much more than most other people I know.
I mean, this is, I think, kind of inevitable.
Okay, let's just move on slightly because he now goes into a bit of a he goes into a little bit of a monologue about something that happened with his wife, and she was like picked on by this salesman. But I'll go forward slightly to, is it 20? Yeah, I'll go into 2200. Yeah, that's when they. Here we go. Because there's another salesman story coming up which is more relevant. Here we go.
Even relevant, but Christina is normally very firm in this kind of way.
Christina's Stefan's wife, and she had this rather aggressive person with her.
But she just, you know, she had she missed the boat a little here, as we all do, heavens knows, from time to time. But people really, they probe, they test body language, they test eye contact, they test in general how it is that you perceive yourself, how it is that you perceive others, your self-esteem, the way that you navigate and negotiate things. This all happens very, very quickly between people.
Yeah.
I had a colleague.
I'll come on to the salesman story in a minute, but I might even summarise it myself. But what he's saying is true. There's, in a sense, R.D. Laing, this sort of Freudian family psychologist who was quite influential in the 60s and 70s. He basically almost said that families. He said basically families were horrible places because this always happens between families. But there is this ruthless pseudo-psychopathic interaction at all times. But what I mean by pseudo-psychopathic is people who are not psychopaths, but they have been manipulated into behaving like psychopaths. They have been indoctrinated into behaving like psychopaths because they believe that's the correct way to behave. They see psychopaths becoming very successful in the soap operas, for example. Psychopaths are always the heroes of a soap opera, like EastEnders, especially. And they watch something like that and they think, well, you know, I'm not really that kind of person, but I better put on the persona of a psychopath. You know, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there, man. That's a phrase I often hear. If you hear someone say that, it's a dog-eat-dog world, man. It's survival of the fittest. You screw people before they screw you. That's what I do, mate. Look after number one. You know, and if they let you do it, well, you know, you got in there first before they were getting at you. Things like that. That kind of justification, that kind of moralization, that rationalization. If you ever hear that from somebody, you know that they're a pseudo-psychopath. They're not a psychopath. Psychopaths need no justification for what they do. Centaur never really tried to justify what was, you know, when my mum said, oh, he was really sorry, he was really, really sorry, he didn't say he was sorry. No, that was my mum making that up. Now, psychopaths need no justification, so they never do that. Pseudo psychopaths do. They have to put up a fake rationalization for what they do. But they do it, and they do it all the time. I mean, there was like, I was saying about stuck-up little bitch nurse, but there was stuck-up little bastard nurse as well. I mean, nursing is like about 3/4 female. I mean, it's almost it's not quite the opposite of portering, because hospital portering is about 90 to 95% male. Nursing is like probably about 75% female. But there are male nurses who are complete scumbags too. There's one guy I knew when when I was in theatre, when I was a theatre porter. He was actually a person I'm pleased to say was not popular generally with the staff in general, but he was disliked generally by the staff, and he was an unpleasant person. And he was one of the people who homed in on me when I was doing my experiment. So, for example, I picked up a friend's mobile phone from the staff room table. And he said to me, "I hope that's switched off, Ben. You know you're not allowed to use your mobile phone in here." And I said, "I'm just picking it up." "Well, I hope it's switched off." And then literally within half an hour, I saw him using his mobile phone in there. This is what I mean. He said he did that to me because he was probing me. And of course, because he knew me, he knew that I was doing this experiment, so my persona was that of a milquetoast pushover. So he took advantage of me. Do you see what I mean? It's like, where's Stefan? Stefan goes on here. I'll just check. It's still recording, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, this is some time ago. It taught me something very, very interesting. The CEO, and we'll just call him Bob. The CEO and Bob went to go and see a vendor. And then later, and then there was a couple of meetings at the CEO...
I'll summarise this because this is quite a long little anecdote that Stefan tells. What it is, there's this guy, a CEO of a company, who has an employee who has to deal with a salesman, a potential client. Now, the client first has an interview with the CEO, and then goes to see Bob, the guy that Stefan's talking about. But the moment he walks in on Bob's meeting, he starts being really nasty to him. Right? Now, Bob doesn't get angry with the salesman, with the client. He gets angry with the CEO. He goes into his boss's office, and he has a go at his boss. And the reason is because he says to the boss, "What are you doing? What did you say to this man to make him think that he could treat me, someone he doesn't know, the way he does? He knows me through your description of me." And the moment he met me, he starts talking down to me and mistreating me, trying to pull a fast one on me. He knew that the CEO had been slagging Bob off behind his back. But anyway, that's a very Stefan really well drags this story out, so I won't go into details. Let's go forward to 27:15. This is the family thing here. Look, this is the family business here. He says something very interesting about the family here. Here we go.
So the environment that you're embedded in is very, very important in terms of what it communicates to other people. So if you come to me, not that you would, but if you did come to me and you complained about the perfidy and falseness and manipulation and unpleasantness of your family, and then you said, "And I'm going over for Sunday dinner," then I would know everything that I needed to know about your level of self-esteem, about the connection that your values had to your emotional life. I would just get you from top to bottom, back to front, A to Z. And I would know that if I bullied you, you would fold. Because how could you not fold?
Yeah, because he complains about the family, but then says I'm going over a Sunday dinner. So he has like a relationship. This person he's talking about, this hypothetical person, has a close relationship with people who are abusive. I see what he means. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that justifies abuse, as I've said. I think it's very sad, and indeed Stefan comes on to this in a little while. I'll just go forward slightly.
So every time you tell a story about yourself to people, every time people see you operating in an environment, every time people see the values that you claim versus the stories that you tell and the life that you live. Any gap between all of these things will be an absolute invitation for people to enter your life and exploit you. You are sending out massive signals. You've got, take me on written in like big scrolling neon letters on your forehead. If you haven't dealt with your family history, if you haven't dealt with your history of humiliation, if you have...
That's true, but again, I say that's not a justification. It's not, the word invitation maybe is the wrong one. It doesn't in any way make it okay for people to do it to you. And based on what Stefan said in program 3879, I think perhaps he does, unless he's contradicting himself. There's a lot of time between him making these two videos, these two programs, I must say. But as I said, it can also be a filter, as I said, for finding out who will not exploit you even when they can. Let's go forward a little bit here.
Right? If you can't be decisive with your parents, then you can't conceivably be decisive in any other area. If you can't be decisive with your loved ones, with your whoever, quote, loved ones, with your spouse, and decisive doesn't mean bullying or yelling or swearing or anything like that, but to make your needs known, negotiate, navigate, all that kind of stuff, then you're going to be constantly inviting other people to come into your life in an aggressive way. And your response is always going to be disproportionate to what is actually occurring.
So either less than it should be or more than it should be. Is that what you mean by I'm not sure what does he mean by disproportionate?
So there's no way, if you've gone through a childhood experience of humiliation, and I have never met a single human being who hasn't, because society and family is so corrupt these days.
That's an important point. Is it like I'll come back to this later about the cause of this. Is it because what Stefan will say, that it's because we don't live in a kind of Ayn Rand utopia, or is it something else? I'm just adjusting my notes slightly. Give me a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Is something else going on? I mean, that's the question, I suppose. But where are we? Right.
But if you have gone through this childhood experience of humiliation, then compliance or aggression is going to be not assertiveness, right? That's the opposite of both. Compliance and aggression are going to be your two fixed ways of being, right?
I told you this was painful. I told you this was going to be a painful video.
You're not going to be able to be assertive because you're either going to knuckle under people's demands, or you're going to yell at them if they're, because they'll manipulate you, and then you'll yell at them, and then you'll look like the crazy, over-aggressive, over-assertive guy. So you're either going to take it personally, like they're screwing with you, and they're not.
I'll go forward
The
slightly.
fundamental. When Christina was told as a child...
This is important. This is where you come onto there's one rule for one and one rule for the other.
You have to be nice, you have to be polite, you have to be considerate of the feelings of others, which is something that we're all told, but I think women get it a little bit more in the neck than men do. So Christina was told, you have to be nice, you have to be considerate towards the feelings of others, you have to be conciliatory, you have to get along with people. Well, that is a rule that is an absolute that is applied to Christina. She is not allowed to break out of that rule. Anytime she steps out of that rule and gets angry at something, or gets frustrated, or is snarky, or whatever, right, when she's a kid, wham, right, she is smashed back into place.
Yeah.
And so, whenever there's, if you have this rule within yourself...
I'll just go forward slightly so he goes on to more details later on. Here we go.
So the rule is, you must always be conciliatory towards other people. That's the rule. That's the rule. That's the rule.
Yeah.
then what happens when somebody is not conciliatory or respectful of my feelings? Now, so you see what it means when I say that it's a universal rule that applies only to you.
A universal rule that applies only to you. Yeah, I mean, I've been through this too. Now this is very much the way my family interacted with my mother's family. My mother was a Dutch woman, and her family lived in the Netherlands. I mean, all the old generation are dead now, and I don't have any contact with the ones who are still alive. But I was always told you had to be polite to them. Always told that politeness was important, and you got to be respectful, and I agree with that. But I noticed, even from the very youngest age that I can remember, that was not reciprocated. And when members of that family were unpleasant to me, suddenly it didn't matter. Suddenly that rule didn't apply. It was only one way universal ethics, and that's important. And Stefan goes over this quite a lot here, and I can't really go into too much details. But it's basically the rules are never for the bullies; they're only for the victims, and that really messes a kid's head up. I mean, it really does in many ways. Now I'm going to go forward quite a long way because Stefan I think he just goes over the same point again. Just try him.
And so, of course, if when you don't respect the feelings of others or are not nice and conciliatory, then you get punished in an ugly way.
Yeah.
Then, if it's a universal rule, then for Christina, this woman who came into her...
Okay, so what he's saying is, and again he goes over this. I'm not going to play the entire audio because he goes over the same point over and over again. So if I as a little child had to be respectful to my Dutch family at all times, polite, but if I didn't, I knew I'd get into serious trouble. But when they were not impolite to me and they were disrespectful to me, nothing was done. My parents did not react against it. They reacted only when I did it. Yet they insisted that this was a universal rule which everyone had to go along with. Now, when children are very good at spotting moral contradictions like that. They do it instinctively, literally instinctively. It's I don't think I need to play any more of this audio. Actually, I think he's gone over all the points. He just repeats himself. Stefan makes a good point here that children essentially are naturally logical. They're naturally logical. They instinctively understand fairness, and they understand that hypocrisy is a bad thing. They don't have to be taught that. The little kid, surely you've been through this experience. You may well have been through this experience. If not, you'll have been through an equivalent kind of experience. It's a bit like this. Your dad sits you down one day, right, and he says, son, I only have a word with you about something very important here, right? You must never smoke. Smoking is really bad for you, right? Whatever you do, don't smoke. It's bad for you, it's antisocial, it's bad, it wastes a lot of money, and you must never do it, alright? Okay? Right, surely you've thought of an example, haven't you, where this happened to you. Your parents, somebody in authority, usually your parents when you're a little kid, will lecture you about doing something, about not doing something, or telling you to do something which they themselves do not obey. They'll try and instill a rule onto you which they themselves do not obey, that they break. I mean, in the famous song of the Beastie Boys, that famous rap group from the 80s, yeah. You ask your dad if you can smoke, and he says no way. The damn hypocrite smokes 2 packs a day. See? And at the very youngest age, children know that, and the kid will say, "But Dad, you're smoking," and then the answer is, "Yeah, look, just do what I say, but not as I do." And that messes up a little kid. And then the rest of the video, I won't play the rest of the video, because then Stefan goes into things about taxation and stuff like that, and about how violence is okay by the state but it's not okay by the individual and things like that. So in a sense that when people are tortured, this kind of mental contradiction, it's almost like a Star Trek robot with smoke coming out of its ears because Kirk says something contradictory to it. You've seen these episodes of Star Trek, and when that is done to children, it has huge effects on them, because they suddenly, when they go through that experience, they realise that they're living in a world full of where other people exhibit rational and moral contradictions, and because children are born with a universal understanding of logic, that causes enormous cognitive dissonance. That's why it's very important to, I think, to be when you have children, and indeed when you deal with other people who are like in a vulnerable position, who are sort of diminutive to yourself, you have to be consistent. You have to apply the same rules to yourself as you apply to others. You have to teach by example, not by just telling people what to do. Universalities that, as Stefan says later on, I won't play you it, but he says later on, Stefan, he talks about universality. He talks about the power disparity. Now, I mean, the ultimate, Stefan always says that the ultimate power disparity is that between the parent and the child. Power disparity is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about people who are vulnerable and those who exploit them or have the potential to exploit them. It's a power disparity which allows that to happen, which allows bullies to bully, and means that people who are bullied end up being bullied because there's this power disparity. The ultimate is between the parent and the child. The parent is the adult and has complete control over that child's life. The child has no way, at a young age anyway, has no way of resisting. Whether it's the parent doing the abusing and the bullying, or whether, in my case, they allow someone else to come into the family and do it, which is what happened to me, there's no way you can fight back. I couldn't fight back against Centaur when I was 8 to 10 years old. I had no way. I didn't even understand what I now understand about that. And I've been in that position. I've been in that position in both ends, because I have been in a position of superior power disparity to other people. Firstly, my own daughter Louisa, she's now 25, and I'm very close to her. It's actually her 25th birthday in a couple of weeks. I never exploited her when we were in that power disparity. I think because of the experiences I'd gone through, I really worked hard not to do that, not to exploit that, because as I said, I was in this position where I've never wanted to do that. I've never wanted that kind of relationship with other people, a relationship of power and abuse. I've always been against that. I've always tried to find the people who are in that kind of relationship and basically come between them and the person who with the higher power who is exploiting that situation. As I've explained, that's what I've always tried to do. Another relationship where there's enormous power disparity is between a man and a woman. And when I was in my relationship with Sue Stain, which sadly ended in 2016, as I've explained, but for 8 years we were in love. She not only because, of course, I'm a man, I'm a big strong man, and she's a woman and is much physically weaker than me. She's not a large woman. I mean, you may have seen her, or you may have seen pictures of her. She's small. I mean, I often marvel at, like, when I see the two of us together, I always think how much smaller she is than me. But it's not just a physical thing. She was also a less robust person than myself. She was a rather vulnerable person. She was rather timid. She wasn't shy. She was sociable, but she was. What's the word I'm looking for? She was in a position where she could have been. She was quite soft and sensitive. Indeed, she was actually mistreated by other people. For example, she had this friend of hers who lived on her street. A sort of woman who was a woman who had her family and lived across the road from her. And Sue Stain used to tell me that this woman had called her a friend, but she wasn't. And And I tried to explain to her. I said, Sue, you know, this woman is not your friend. This woman is someone you need to get rid of in your life. Because this woman, interestingly, never wanted to meet me. I think because she knew what I would do. She knew the abuser often tries to keep people separate. I mean, this woman actually tried to split the two of us up at one point, and that was just I just had it out with her, you know. That's another example of a power disparity. And what's really horrible is that the psychopaths, and even some of the pseudo-psychopaths, they're not brainless. I mean, they understand this. Because people often say that they have no awareness of this. Some people make excuses for the pseudo-psychopaths, saying that they don't have an awareness of this situation, therefore they can't really be blamed. It's like, I think the phrase from EastEnders, there was one of the sort of like diminutives in EastEnders. Once, I mean, his wife said to somebody, look, they take advantage of him and they don't even realise they're doing it. But they do, you see. Because if you have a loyalty to universality, they will exploit that. Because people who have a loyalty to universality are often very self-critical. And they're often very empathic, as I am. As I said, I am hyper-empathic. And so other people will exploit that self-critical element of it. So they know that you believe in universality. They know that you believe, oh look, you've got to be polite and respectful to everyone. It's a universal rule. But then they will use your loyalty to that principle as against you, which means that they know what it is. They understand what it is. That they understand that they themselves are not being fair and honest, and they don't care. Many people on the receiving end of bullying end up, some of them pull through, some of them work their way through it, and then they rise again from the ashes, which is what I've done, I'm pleased to say. Others don't. Others fall by the wayside. Some of them fall into mental illness, some of them commit suicide. And you know what, these pseudo-psychopathic torturers, I don't think any of them feel any remorse. I think they just move on. I think if I had succumbed to depression and despair as a result of my experiment in the hospital, and I just jumped off level 7 and landed in the car park and the ambulance bay, I think the pseudo-psychopaths, the stuck-up little bitch nurses, the nasty senior porter, they just shrugged and said, right, on to the next waterhole. I think they literally are that horrible. And I mean, the question is this just something wrong with human nature? Is this just something, an element, is this something inevitable within us that we can't change? Or is this a result of us living in the Illuminati-occupied world, which we have been, let's face it, human beings have been living in the Illuminati-occupied world now for well over 5,000 years. And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know if in a post-Illuminati world that would change. I think it would improve, because, well, firstly, the propaganda like EastEnders and things like that wouldn't be there. So I think it would improve, but would we at a fundamental level change, or is this just the way we are and we have to deal with it? We have to find a way of functioning as a society in the post-Illuminati world with this inevitable part of us. Or is it possible that when the Archons or the reptilians can no longer intrude themselves into our universe, that will change? I don't know. Or will we come out of the Illuminati world exactly the same? Either way, I mean, it could be that we won't know the answer. There's no way to actually answer that question, simply because we are so embedded within the Illuminati occupied world. And again, this is me effing the ineffable again, like I said in my live stream, my last live stream about the Roswell trilogy. I'm trying to speculate on something that I can't possibly understand, because it's something that's beyond any current mental framework, because it's something that exists beyond the horizon of what is comprehensible to a person who's not only lived their life within the Illuminati occupied world, but whose parents, grandparents, and generations dating back to basically to the beginning of history have lived their life within that Illuminati occupied universe. So the answer is, I don't know. And Well, maybe I'll do another program on it at some time. But I mean, I wonder if it's possible to know an answer to that. Maybe you maybe you, the viewers, have your own opinion on that, and you can put them in the comments boxes. In which case, I'll be very grateful for that. I really, really will. I hope you'll do that, and I hope. And when the next comments reply video comes along, I'll maybe get into a dialogue with you about it. And I wish I could do sooner, but I just get too many comments. So, I hope you found that interesting, my little take there on humiliation and a reply to Stefan Molyneux. I'm sure Mr. Molyneux will come up with something else that will make me want to put photons onto celluloid at some point soon. But in the meantime, there won't be any more videos uploaded for a few days because I'm going to Hull and I'm going to somewhere else on Thursday night. There'll be at least 2 more videos as a result of my expeditions this weekend. So have a look out for them. I'll get them edited and uploaded. I'll be back on Monday afternoon. Hopefully I'll get them edited and uploaded as soon as possible. So have a look out for them. And remember, if you can, RawCon 2020, it's in Hull. It's this weekend coming. If you're the time of uploading, that is the Saturday the 29th and Sunday the 1st. Saturday the 29th of February and Sunday the 1st of March. It's a leap year this year, 2020. If you are watching before that time, just after this video has been uploaded, please do get along to that if you can, because I'm doing a fascinating talk on Sunday afternoon about the witchcraft trial of 1944. I'm also going to be hanging around all weekend. I'll have my stall with my books on, so you get a signed copy. I do hope to see you there. In the meantime, thank you all of you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.